Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the In the Mind podcast affiliated with Depths of Youth. I'm Haley, your host for today, and I have with me
Anshul.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm a grade 11 high school student. I'm aspiring to be a data scientist when I grow up. I love physics, I love chemistry, and I love talking in these types of talk shows here. And today I'm just glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So in today's episode, we'll be talking about the stigmas in male mental health. So I thought it'd be good to have an average male perspective in here. The first thing I think we should cover is, first of all, how relevant the core gender norms are in your everyday life. So I'll give you a few prompts in which you'll rate 1 to 10 of how you feel you have to adhere to these prompts.
Okay.
Sound good? If you need any clarification, just let me know.
No worries.
Okay, number 1. How much do you feel you have to adhere to fulfill the role of the protector within your household, generally?
Okay. Let's first start off, talk about maybe the emotional aspect of that. So I feel like this stems of like the way you grow up as a male, okay? Growing up, I was always taught to man up, and this idea of, being strong and not always crying. And that kind of influenced me as like growing up to be, think of myself to be more stoic, less like free of emotions, and to the point where if I'm free of those emotions, like I can help other people also be free of those emotions, like not have the type of stress, not have that type of the pain, anxiety around that. And I also see that around like my dad as well. So it's a lot about being protector of upholding emotional and family values. And the more I think as a man, as a father, which I'm not, but I know as my dad, like his core values is like being, protecting the family's core values, like protecting the family in all aspects of life, not just not just like at home, but like outside as well when you go to people's houses. So yeah, pretty much that's it.
And how would you say physically in comparison to maybe someone like your older sister or even your mother?
In terms of physically, well, you always have to stay vigilant, right? Like I don't think at that point just comes to like just gender norms. I think if I ever see my sister like on the street, like if she's like getting harassed by someone, obviously I'm gonna I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna be a good brother. But at that point, it doesn't even come from like being a man, just comes from helping people.
Well, do you think, especially as a role of an older brother in comparison to an older sister, you have more responsibility over her physicality while you're out or something like that, and to be protecting of her?
No. Well, my sister, like she's 5 years older than me, right? So essentially my entire life, I've been the youngest child in the family.
Oh, I thought you had 2 sisters.
No, just one.
Sorry,
Come on,
my
it's okay. But like, I mean, she's always been protective of me, interestingly. So I compared this a lot to like some of my other friends. Like for example, let's take this guy named Dan. Okay, so Dan has a younger sister, and I've noticed that he has a lot more masculine qualities. Like he's more assertive. He's able to take control like most discussions and most of the scenarios, protective of his younger sister. And I find it very hard, or I find it a bit difficult to be more assertive and more dominant in those sort of scenarios. But ideally, like it's still my role to care for everyone in my family, not just my older sister. So
yeah. Okay. Number 2. Do you feel that you must adhere to this role, which is to react less emotionally in situations compared to those of females in your female social groups or in your social groups in general?
Okay. Could you provide a scenario for this?
For example, if you and your female friend had both failed a science quiz, do you think that the reaction would be more plausible if it was you were the one breaking down and crying in the middle of the hallway, or your female friend? And which do you think is more normalized?
I think it's based on perspective. I think both male and female friends, we all have this idea of like, okay, if I cry, I wonder what everyone else is going to think of me. It's same thing with the female friend as well. If she cries, what everyone else is going to think of her. I think it's more normalized that in those sort of scenarios, like we're supposed to be the breadwinner, we're supposed to be like, no, this is fine. Like I can take control of this moment. But that's obviously not the truth. But like men should be more, express their emotions. Like say, have enough courage to say, okay, well I failed this. Now what can I do to get better? and that just not just for men, but that also goes towards female friends as well. So in terms of rating that, I'd probably give that maybe like a 3 out of 10.
3 out of 10?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Prompt number 3, do you feel you need to dominate conversations and lead in professional aspects of your life in comparison to other genders?
So obviously very objective, based on different scenario.
Subjective?
Yeah, subjective.
You said objective.
Sorry, subjective. They're based on different subjects.
Yeah,
like,
obviously.
if it's out of my expertise, out of my skills, I'm more likely to listen. If it's not, I'm more likely to talk. But at that point, I don't think it even comes down to gender norms, it just comes down to personality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more of a listener, and I tend to listen to people a lot more often, and I love to listen to conversations. But I will say this though, for most men, I feel like it's better for them to dominate in most areas, especially when it comes to like, if they have a girlfriend or if they have family or something, it's good for them to dominate because it creates confidence.
Yeah.
And confidence is very attractive to most people in society. It increases their own self-esteem, which is a good factor to counteracting mental health issues. And if they have that sort of dominance, they essentially are kind of immune to most depressive factors in their life. Well, not, I wouldn't say immune, but it's much better for them.
So I feel like often a characteristic, confidence, is very much associated with the male gender, right? So do you think that your role as a listener or how you've been conditioned is largely due to your family and how they don't maybe uphold you to a certain masculinity standard, as in they don't necessarily require you to fill a certain social role, and you feel like you're able to kind of lay back and listen to people instead? Because as you said before, oftentimes you notice with other males or your other friends that are males, you feel like they maybe more often than not dominate the conversation and that their personality is groomed that way. Do you think that is due to their family background and that your listening role is also due to your family background?
I do think that upbringing does play quite a role, but yeah, I completely agree with everything you said actually. That upbringing does play quite a bit of role in how like men express themselves. But then again, you have the power to nurture your own self. You are pretty much the best teacher that's available. And as a man, society believes that we're supposed to do things on our own. That's the major social construct that we have, which if you take advantage of that, you can quite literally create a different like version of yourself that's quite immune to other people's opinions. And you can like create your own confidence. It doesn't have to come from family values.
To be athletic and challenge yourself physically, as in to work out, play sports, and etc.
I give this prompt maybe 9 out of 10, personally because I like sports.
But do you feel pressured to do that?
Not at all. No. Maybe competition is another thing that I have. It's my other like it's a knack that I have, that like I look at other people, I look at some of my other friends. They kind of motivate me to go out and play sometimes, but it's not something that I'm forced to do.
Not forced, but pressured.
Pressured. It's something I'm not really pressured to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be directly either. Do you ever feel like there's this indirect standard that you yourself have to, be more like physical, involved in more, I guess, rigorous activities in comparison to maybe females?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Do you feel that you would be judged for having interest in what we would perceive to be girly topics?
It's always the girly topics. No. Like, even when I have discussions with my friends, like, we don't even talk about this stuff at all. We just talk about sports, like making fun of each other, sometimes doing dumb stuff, but not at all. Like, in terms of girly topics, I'd probably say you're assuming like nails, fashion, I don't know, like stuff that you probably do, but we don't.
I mean, typically those things that are of interest of the female sex or will be associated to be kind of in interest of the female sex. For example, do you feel at any way you'd be judged if you just like to paint your nails in your free time?
If I don't care at that point. Like, I wouldn't even tell anyone.
Because you're embarrassed?
No, not that. Just like like no one else shares that same interest, so why would I talk about that to most people?
So do you think it's abnormal do you have mostly male friends, would you say?
Yes.
So do you think it's abnormal within your male community for someone to be painting their nails? Something associated more
Yes.
with femininity? Yes, right. So would you say that you would feel you'd be judged more so if you were to involve in those topics or interests in comparison to what you already have conversations about with your male friends?
Probably. Yeah.
Probably?
Yeah.
So on a scale of 1 to 10? Like, as you said before, you probably wouldn't tell anybody if you were painting your nails, right?
Mhm.
Are you hesitant because of how they would react?
It's probably, in this case, for me, 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10, right? It's pretty high. I would agree. To act logically and never based on personal feelings. Do you think there's more leeway, for example, for a girl to act based on personal emotions, act out maybe potentially because of heartbreak or whatever may be happening in her life, and for you to keep kind of a cold stone face and keep your emotions separate from what your actions are like? Or
Yeah.
maybe just not even in comparison, just do you feel that you have an obligation to other people to keep your personal or emotions separate from however you act?
Yes, I think I probably draw like a clear line between how I act logically and how I act emotionally. I'd probably say awareness is a big thing before you even talk about emotional and logical. Like before I even do an action, I question myself 2-3 times. Okay, like what's perpetuating me to start like acting the way I'm acting right now. So yeah, I mean, I definitely 100% believe that acting logically is much more beneficial than acting on emotion.
So what would be your 1 to 10 on that?
9.
9? Because I think from my personal perspective, just when I'm thinking about that prompt, I don't feel necessarily all the time that I have an obligation to keep my actions separate from my emotions. As in, if something were to happen to me and I'm completely and emotionally distraught, I would hope that people can understand that where my actions are coming from is because I'm experiencing something. Right? So I'm just wondering if you feel the same way, or if you feel that whenever you interact with people, you kind of have to put up this facade.
That is another thing as well I wanted to address. Like I feel like most guys, especially me, we like masking our identity sometimes.
Yeah.
Not often. I would say not often as females. Like you can give me your point on this. You can tell me if you disagree.
100%.
But I feel like more than, less than females, we probably mask sometimes our identity based on different people.
Less than females.
Less than females. Do you agree?
I mean, in what sense? Because
Like
I'm
if
not
you.
generalizing the genders, right?
Mhm.
But if I'm giving my personal experience on, for example, my female friends versus my male friends,
Mhm.
I would say most often than not, my male friends are hesitant to share their emotions and their feelings and their shortcomings in comparison with my female friends,
Right.
who oftentimes will, I don't know, gather up or something like that, and we'll speak about our emotions and how we feel about certain things and reflect on them as a group. Is it a tendency that males are less likely to do that in a group within their own genders?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think most of our conversations or most of our meetings are purely like more physically based, like maybe like playing or something, like playing a sport, playing video games or something.
Yeah. More surface level, maybe not
Yeah.
as emotional.
Yeah, but when you meet up some of your female friends, do you
Yeah.
think that like the sessions you guys have, like when you talk about your feelings, do you think that's actually helpful?
I actually do. I feel like getting a different perspective, it is helpful, because I think a lot of the time when you close yourself off and you don't get a different perspective, you aren't able to reflect in the same way,
Mhm.
right? So what I think about female friendships in comparison to, I guess, I wouldn't say your average, again, not generalizing, I'm just giving
Mhm.
based on experience, is that what you're saying is mostly you guys hang out with each other to have fun.
Mhm.
For females, what a deep and caring friendship with each other is to, I guess, also have fun, to experience things together, but in the same way, to be there for each other when things happen, to discuss our emotions, to reflect on them, right? And I'm just not sure exactly if it's the gender norms that detach the two in comparison, and if you feel like you can in the same way talk with your male friends about what's going on behind the surface level.
I'd say maybe when every time we have like different friendships with some of our male friends, it's also based off of like what the friendship is about. Like if
Yeah.
I have friendships, say in school based on academics, if I all of a sudden start opening up about like what happened last weekend, like I don't know, so and so happened, and that kind of emotionally hurt me, it's almost like how can like this person relate to? How can this person like give me like feedback if I don't even have that type of relationship with that person? And in that case, I'd probably go to someone like more like my sister, who has maybe I don't know, like experience with some of her friends coming up to her like that. So that's also another reason why I feel like some of us guys, we don't go up to our own friends and be like, hey, how this happened, or like how did your weekend go? But it should actually be a bit more normalized, I think. Like I have a few friends that actually ask me like, how's your day going? Like how's life been treating you?
Yeah.
And it's really refreshing.
It is, right?
It is really refreshing.
Yeah, so actually, maybe we should jump to a different topic in the middle of our prompts because I did write something down.
Mm-hmm.
So, the prompt that I want to bring up, or kind of the discussive topic, is do stigmas in male mental health extend from within male friendships more so than cross-gendered friendships? So, how do you think your male friend would react to a discussion about mental health in comparison to your female friends generally? So like you said before, you're kind of hesitant to bring up certain topics about how would they relate to if I told them about my weekend. Mm-hmm. Do you feel there's the same judgment from maybe your female friends?
I'd say, okay, so in this case, a female friend, like, I'd say maybe it's my sister, right? If I...
Your female friend, your sister?
No, example. She's not my only female friend, okay? She's not my only female friend, okay? But if I were to ask my sister, right, like, this happened, this, like, kind of, like, broke me. Like I was like say we have an example named like Clark, and Clark told me, I don't know, random Clark. Okay, Clark told me last weekend that he's been like doing some gossip behind my back. He was like,
No, Clark.
Yeah, Clark.
No. Okay.
Well, Clark was like, I don't know, Anshul. He paints his nails, whatever. Okay. And and that's like kind of emotionally destroyed me. Oh. And then like my sister, like if I approached that to my sister, she'd probably be like, okay, well, she'd probably relate that to like her own personal experiences, right? She'd be like, okay, if that actually happened to me, here's what I would do. So it is a lot more in depth. Sometimes when I talk to my sister, like she helps me, like find the solution to the problem, like right down to the core. But with male friendships, it's a lot more logical in the sense where, do you think that nail polish, like, do you personally think that like painting your nails is weird? Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Like if that appears to be weird, and then I say yes, then he's like, okay, well then they're right then, right? Then you have no reason to be wrong. Like you have no reason to feel sad or to feel like embarrassed in that case.
Okay, I see what you mean. Because I think, in my eyes, if I were to talk to one of my male friends versus one of my female friends, I guess considerably the same in our level of friendship, our depth in our friendship. I would say if I was bringing up the scenario to my male friend, I would likely be like, hey, well, this person said this thing about me, right? And then we would kind of stay on the surface, I would assume, whereas if I was talking to my female friend, I'd be like, this person said this thing about me. I'm not sure why they said that. It's kind of making me feel insecure, and I would talk to them about what they think about that, right? So do you think that's kind of a similar scenario, whereas you would talk more in depth with someone like your sister versus someone like your friend from school?
Yeah.
Yeah. I made a good prompt.
Sorry.
Okay. So do you think there's a relationship between femininity regarding of genders that is more accepting towards emotional discussions? So for example, not just a male or a female, but if you think about the regular traits associated with femininity, as in being softer, being more considerate of what we would, first of all, if you think about two people, one is like ultra masculine, one is ultra feminine. Think about the differences. And whether or not if you had a male friend that showcased more signs of the female traits, would it be easier to talk to them in comparison to the more masculine friend?
No, because, well, what would I talk with them? Like, give me like a topic, like I'll talk to them about.
Clark is talking behind your back. He is telling everybody that you cried in his arms last night, for example, and you're feeling ultra embarrassed, okay? Ultra embarrassed. Do you think that you'd be more comfortable talking to your ultra masculine friend, who we'll name Joe, versus your friend, who is also a male, but showcases more feminine traits, Jackson?
Okay, am I embarrassed about like...
You're ultra embarrassed.
Then I won't tell anyone.
But who would you feel more comfortable talking to?
Myself. I don't think I
Okay,
wouldn't
you know
tell
what?
anyone.
That's fine. That's
Yeah.
fine. So you just feel more comfortable by yourself, and no matter whatever traits somebody showcases, you just feel like you have to continue to seek in your own powerful will to rejuvenate yourself of your self-confidence, essentially. Because I would say, if, for example, I'm seeking to talk to my friend about something I'm feeling insecure about, oftentimes, sure, I'm trying to reflect, but I'm also trying to rejuvenate my self-confidence. As in, I want them to tell me, oh, well, they did this because this is this. I think this is this. And, it helps me in reflecting, helps me feel more confident about the situation. For example, do you think that talking to somebody else about it versus just keeping it to yourself, what would be more helpful for you to regenerate from that scenario, mentally and emotionally?
So when I'm being outspoken on this topic, I feel like if I have some embarrassing scenario, like say I'm embarrassed about like what happened with Clark or something, like I don't think I would probably be outspoken in terms of that. I'd probably rephrase it in the sense that, hey, if so and so happened to you, like how would you react to it, and maybe how could like is there a better option? Like how would you do it in that scenario? I'd probably compare myself in terms of that aspect. I probably wouldn't like tell them the direct scenario in terms of that, but I'd probably compare it with myself and just find how I could be more prepared for that scenario, more competent if in that case, like being like emotionally vulnerable to the point where I'm crying in someone's arms. How could I make that happen less often in that sense, or how can I not make that happen at all? And just learning from the scenario, honestly. It would stem less from just having a conversation with someone, just like learning from the experience.
So more so seeking their logical aid in comparison to having them help you emotionally.
Yes.
Okay. So I think we kind of touched on this before, but do you think potentially there's a lack of emotional depth within your male friendships?
No, not at all. I think the entire point why we have male friendships is that there is some emotional connection between two or more people, and because of that, you share some kind of experience, and that experience gets translated into emotional depth that you have between them. So if there's a lack of emotional depth, are you guys really friends?
Well, that's what I'm asking, because I think you previously stated that, a lot of the times whenever you go out with your male friends or such like that, you're kind of just going to experience things together. I guess most of the time you're participating in activities that are more physical, but you don't have many emotional discussions. So do you think that in that way your friendships lack that emotional depth?
I think, like I mentioned before, we all have different relationships between different friends. So when we're out playing sports, we're probably talking about sports. We're probably not the best place to talk about mental health or having specific places where we talk about that.
But do you think conversations about mental health would even begin? When was the last time you talked to a male friend about mental health?
2 months ago.
2 months ago?
Yeah.
Was it a deep discussion?
Yeah.
Did you feel comfortable in the discussion? And does it happen often?
No.
Does not happen often.
No.
Right? So I guess what I'm comparing to, I don't think you can really compare it to any other experience you had, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure if this has to do with my femininity or maybe just my personality or the depth of my friendships, which I think is very, emotionally deep.
Right.
Is we constantly talk about the state of our emotions. We constantly talk about whatever had happened and occurred that has affected us in some way. We talk about our deep-rooted childhood traumas or something like that.
Damn.
Do you feel like that's something that's normalized in your friendships to talk about? Or do you think most of the time it's surface level? If you're playing sports and you have activities to kind of distract you from, not distract you, but just your friendship is more so rooted in activities and not in the discussions.
Yeah, I think you quite actually got it. It's that most of men, we tend to counteract our mental health or discussions in the form of escapism, in form of escapist activities. If they probably suppress their emotion or their own mental health in the form of maybe boxing or maybe through martial art, just hitting a bag, and that arrogance or that form of testosterone that builds up within men, they end up expressing it through some sort of activity and being a bit more outspoken in that words. And it just depends on in what form do they escape in, if it's a good mechanism or if it's a bad mechanism. And a good mechanism would be, for example, like playing a sport. A bad mechanism would be like, I don't know, doing some harm to others. And it just depends on which vehicle you take.
I think a lot of the thing is also that in males specifically, there are studies attributed to see that testosterone acts as a battling mechanism against psychiatric disorders.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the time we see that men, I guess, are more high strung and they're less likely to feel the effects of mental health disorders in comparison to women. So maybe a lot of the time why you don't have discussions about that is just because you're less prone to experience it. Not saying that you don't experience it, but that you're less prone.
I have a question for you. Do you think it all comes down to our nature or the way we're nurtured? An experience like of how expressive we are for mental health in that sense?
Well, I think there's a difference between social and biological, right? What I was referencing before, as in the testosterone, it may make you less vulnerable to psychiatric disorders, but not completely outright, like, right? But when we're talking about social factors, as in the way we're conditioned to think, the way we're conditioned to feel vulnerable in our friendships, then I think a lot of the time it is nurture, right? Because, for example, you might think that from childhood you have a tendency not to seek other people's help, but maybe a lot of that is because you didn't get a lot of help from, not directing this towards anybody, but maybe you didn't have a lot of open conversations with your family. And so underlyingly, that is telling you from a very young age, this is not something you have a conversation about with other people, right? This is something you keep to yourself. So I think a lot of it is nurture. But again, there are some biological things, some things with your brain, like neurologically, some people just tend to keep to themselves, and some people tend to have some sort of, I guess, ways of counteracting their stress and stuff like that. But I think a lot of it has to do with nurture. I mean, for example, if from a young age I've had these conversations with my friends about our mental health and our emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I was nurtured that way, I think I'd be more likely to speak on that with my friends in the current age in comparison to when I have never felt like that before.
Okay.
Most likely. Do you think, your personal opinion, that whenever you see mental health on social media, the ads or the influencer is often targeting a feminine viewership base? So do you feel like a lot of the coping mechanisms they talk about or the experiences they have in mental health are targeted and rooted in female experiences, and you don't have a place in the mental health community on social media? I think there is an uprising and a lot of more males talking about it's okay to be vulnerable online. It's okay to talk about your mental health issues, because a lot of the time males are taught to suppress that. But do you think that from your personal experience, when you see the influencers online, do you think that their, content is more targeted towards females or males when speaking on mental health? A lot of the time when I see content, it could just be because a lot of the time, obviously, your social media platforms, they kind of cater your For You page and your Reels to what you indulge in, what you comment in, what you interact with, right? So a lot of the time when I see content about mental health, it's more so the influencer is female, or they're talking about the female experience. They give coping mechanisms I feel are often more catered to females. So on your social media platforms, do you think the same? Do you see often male influencers talking about mental health in an open environment of which it needs to be? Or do you think it's more often the role of female influencers to open up that conversation?
I think it's a lot more females in terms of men in that case. Yeah.
Agreed. Another quick topic.
Awesome.
Do you feel that there are significantly more resources allocated to women in terms of mental health? So I think we should just narrow it down maybe to your school experience, okay? Do you feel like you'd be heavily judged by your guidance counselor if you went up and asked for a meeting with them and talked about your mental health?
No, because in that case, I know that my guidance counselor, that's pretty much their job to help me out with being emotionally distraught and just helping me find ways to cope with it. So no, it wouldn't be my first choice. I mean, sure, I wouldn't feel embarrassed at all. I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you feel that counselors and teachers within the school provide slightly different or largely different treatment according to sex, perceived by the polarity between the importance of male and female mental health? So do you think potentially just in the back of your mind, a lot of your guidance counselors or authority figures within your school seem to prioritize or pay more attention to the female mental health because that's what we're kind of conditioned to feel like in comparison to male mental health?
Sorry, could you repeat that. I lost you.
As in, do you maybe feel like it's a consideration more so for female students than it is male students from your teachers and your guidance counselors? Let's just give you a straightforward example. If you're handing an assignment late in comparison to a female in which you're both struggling, do you think that you would have a different reaction from authority figures within your school because there's more consideration for females when it comes to mental health and emotional issues in comparison to men?
No. I don't really know much about that in my school because I know that doesn't really happen as often. At least I don't know much stories about it, but it might be happening. Mostly more with, I think, women than men. But who am I to speak on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, do you ever see like a difference in treatment in terms of gender when it comes to your teachers?
Absolutely not.
Or do you ever feel like your teachers maybe more favor a certain gender, maybe just slightly, maybe conversationally? None of your teachers?
Nope.
Okay, that's you.
Do you disagree?
I don't disagree, but I feel like for some reason often, I mean, there's this one teacher I hear from school that I definitely know that you had that apparently favored the female students in comparison to male students, but I don't think that's so much to do with the stigma of female students experiencing more mental health issues. I just think a lot of the time they seem to have a certain perspective on which kind of gender they like to have more conversations with.
They're just doing a bad job then as a guidance counselor.
Okay, well, I think if there's nothing else you want to add.
I'd say if there's any main takeaway, anyone, especially a guy who's listening to this episode, can take. Huh?
Guidance?
No, like I'm saying, if there's any guy that's listening to this.
Oh, guy.
Yeah, if there's any guy that's listening to this podcast at the moment and they want to take some key takeaway, I'd probably just tell them, like, just live your life the way you see it. It doesn't matter the opinions of others. It doesn't matter like what you tell them, what you don't tell them. Like, to be honest, we're all gonna die eventually. Right?
Yeah.
So, just live your life. Just it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
I think what I grasped from this conversation specifically is, as you can tell, kind of a lot of the prompts that I made to ask you about was to kind of gauge where you feel like you're at in comparison to, I guess, historically, the kind of standards between men and women. I mean, vulnerability, emotional, but it seems like a lot of the time you're very in the middle. You don't feel like there are many like perpetuated social barriers for you emotionally, and I guess a lot of the times maybe it might be your own personality, or maybe just something we see in gender that you like to keep to yourself more often and find self-solace in comparison to emotionally having conversations with your friends. The mental health scene is constantly upgrading. I think there are more influencers talking about male mental health and how to be more inclusive in terms of that. But I think there's another important thing in clinical trials as well. We just have to make sure that there's an equal representation in clinical trials when it comes to medications or whatever it is regarding mental health in all genders, even non-binary, whatever it is. And that's the main takeaway. So thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We really hope you enjoyed our productive conversation. And we hope that you tune in next time for another episode of In the Mind.
See you.